You think you stand a chance?
Devil May Cry 3 is an amazing rollercoaster of action. With every mission it manages to top itself with exciting bosses and dope devil arms to toy around with. So for a game that manages to retain so many highs, it's shocking to see that its crowning achievement lies in the finale between the two sons of Sparda. Vergil is often touted as one of the best rival characters in video game history, and occasionally brought up as one of the best bosses of all time. And yet in spite of his overwhelming praise, no one has really explained why he's a great boss. Sure, there's a lot to say about his character and the sublime story, but everyone seems to be content to say that he's a grueling boss who'll beat you senseless again and again. How is this tiny little man with a toy sword meant to be intimidating? And if it's such an ordeal to beat him, why isn't my frustration getting bigger? Welcome to my video. We got no food, no drinks, and the only babe just left. But I'm gonna make an attempt to explain why the third and final fight between Dante and Vergil has captured the hearts of so many fans. But first, we need to have a quick refresher on this rabble-rouser of a brother. One of the big selling points of Devil May Cry 3 and onwards is its bountiful list of actions Dante can take within the limits of a few buttons, offering a variety of quick slashes, multiple hits, gap closers, and ranged attacks at your disposal. These are all managed by swappable guns, swords, and cape styles, which you must pick out before you start a mission. Your mobility, for all intents and purposes, can be described as rigid. Swift maneuvers can only be performed in straight lines or straight arcs, with enough weight in the air to bring you to the ground quickly. Makes sense, I mean, have you seen what this guy eats? But what's important to note is that there are holes in your defense. Dashes, jumps, and side rolls come with small takes of recovery where you're open to abuse. With Trickster you can take up to 3 evasive actions before you need a breather, either 3 dashes in a row or a double jump mixed in with a Sky Star. And if you want to try the other styles, your options are limited to the double jump and an unreliable side roll. Now before the Royal Guard goblins release into the comments, you can technically block every attack in the game, as long as you have perfect timing. Otherwise, there are many attacks that can't be blocked normally, and while there are ways to make the perfect block timing easier, they only work on a select amount of attacks. But it's not a big deal, enemies and bosses are not nearly aggressive enough to exploit those holes, and usually one dodge is more than enough to take you to safety. Like, maybe if someone had a 5-hit combo, then it would get crazy. Yeah, about that. Our boy in blue offers an extremely threatening bread and butter, not just because of the sheer length of the combo, but because it challenges every defensive option the player possesses. The plunging attack striking players who hope to stay above the situation, and the follow-up stinger catching up to it and trying to put some distance from it. Only the first 2 hits can be blocked without perfect timing, and messing up even once will mean taking the full brunt of this devil's power. Not happy enough with this overwhelming advantage, many parts of Vergil's kit work as a natural counter against his sibling. Judgment cuts are effective against Royal Guards, Round Trip is effective against Tricksters, and the downward thrust is super effective against flying types. These techniques are further bolstered by Vergil's study of the dark arts, allowing him to rise above such petty acts as exercise, with the ability to teleport Turo away from you whenever he likes. With this, he can always strike from the perfect spot. No matter where he is relative to the player, he can make any move he fancies. Try as you might to keep up in his face, it only takes a second for him to back away and fire off a projectile. This all serves to craft a relentless opponent who'll force you to exhaust all your defensive options, and even then that might not be enough. You can't spend all your dashes at once or block in a panic expecting safety, and if you're a swordmaster or gunslinger, you'll have to make do with the bare necessities. As your brother tries to suffocate you in a flurry of strikes, you need to get your timing down and recognize the gaps in his patterns in order to find room to breathe. If you manage that, you'll be treated to a golden opportunity, an opening that's small enough that you can't capitalize on if you took a beating or ran away, but if you can keep up with this silver-haired samurai, you're sure to have a blast. Unlike the majority of Dante's rogues who rarely flinch at his attacks, Vergil works on a different set of rules. He can parry and instantly retaliate against any melee strikes if you try to make the first move. The only time that you can land a hit on him is after Vergil starts swinging. Once you've caught him off guard, you can continue to slap him about until he starts blocking again, which is telegraphed by Vergil getting knocked back much further than usual. Occasionally he will immediately go on the defensive after the first strike, punishing anyone who wasn't paying attention. The amount of hits you could throw in before Vergil strikes back are dependent on the attacks you used, each having a different numerical figure assigned to them. Anyone who's familiar with Mr. Nomura's Wild Ride may refer to these as revenge values. The fact that Vergil can block all your attacks means that he's firmly in control of the flow of the duel. It's a back and forth where you're always taking the second step, every act performed in response to Vergil's lead. The revenge values obviously prevent players from taking huge chunks of his health, but still pushes you to squeeze out every bit of damage as you can, making the most of each successful skirmish so you don't have to win as many. But beware, it may look like things are going alright until Vergil pulls his devil trigger.
You're going down.
Every now and then, Vergil will tap into his inner devil and enter a state of pure motivation. In his DT form, he will not flinch from your attacks regardless of when or where you've hit him from. You gotta move fast, don't be slow, as it's much riskier to go on the offensive here when you can't stop him from fighting back, leaving only enough room for a quick poke before he unleashes his next barrage. But what's even more threatening is that just like Dante, Double Trigger also regenerates Vergil's health. This may seem like a minor detail, but I would argue this is the most threatening part of Vergil's kit. It's easy for players to resort to playing safe, opting only to fight back when it's guaranteed they won't be punished for it. It's a viable way to play games and one that's hard for devs to deter without coming off as malicious, but it's also a tactic that ignores a lot of potential interactions when they come with added risk. If you try to fight Vergil in a war of attrition, you will have a bad time. Because of his health regeneration, the fight can be drawn out to ridiculous lengths depending on how passively you play. At worst, you can end up back to square one with much less health because the rate that he heals outpaces the amount of damage you can do each round. It pushes players to take an active stance and experiment because the alternative feels like a waste of time, and as a result, players will have one or two eureka moments as they figure out what they can get away with. Because while I have been emphasizing how intimidating of a boss Vergil is, he's still designed to be beatable. Despite the attempts to paint your brother as your equal, there seems to be some areas where he struggles, namely that it takes more time for him to recover from his animations. This little devil might hate to admit it, but he's quite the show-off, putting a lot of time and effort into every flourish of the Yamato. It would be very elegant if it didn't expose him to an atomic beatdown. Make use of trickster dashes, teleports, or the gap closers in your arsenal, and you can exploit those openings as long as you stay close by at the end of his combos. Say, remember that uppercut you could do with Beowulf? It's really strong, but it takes an eternity to wind up. You can never find a time or place to make use of it. Well, you'll be happy to hear that the attacks Vergil uses in his final phase are just as exhausting as they are threatening, leading to moments where he just stands there, menacingly, giving you tons of time to practice your Shoryuken. Royal Guard may be out of the question when the going gets tough, but you don't need to be a master blocker in order to serve some delicious payback. Round Trip and Summon Swords can be held back by simple blocking, and if you're good enough at avoiding danger with the jump, then you'll have no problem blocking attacks with the Jump Guard, which can completely trivialize one of his most dangerous techniques. Remember that with each successful block, you're building up to a devastating counter that can shave minutes off the duel. And if you still struggle with the timing, you can parry certain attacks instead. Stinger and Round Trip can be neutralized with a well-timed attack, and the window of success can be more generous if you use the multi-hitting moves with disjointed hitboxes, like Prop, Shredder, and Cerberus in general. Now what if you want to hit your brother without having him run off to mommy? Throwing hands won't solve the issue, but guns do. Aside from the occasional block, Vergil doesn't really react to firearms and projectiles, let alone parry them, so take advantage of it. In the time it takes Vergil to perform his little Mexican standoff, you can let loose with a reverb shock or a hail of rockets. Maybe you want to squeeze some more damage in at the end of a combo. It's the perfect time to practice your no-scoping skills. Maybe throw a taunt in there. Yeah, taunting! It might seem like an unimportant function, but it can play a big role in restoring your DT gauge. There's tons of opportunities to throw in some verbal abuse for this already strained relationship. Now you could use your DT form to raise your endurance when things get dicey, or if the extra health doesn't tickle your fancy, you can trade that survivability for a big chunk of damage using DT burst. Speaking of DT, Vergil's devil form isn't set on a strict time limit, meaning you can knock him out of his temper tantrum if you hand out enough bruises. A tempting offer for those ballsy enough. Put everything you've learned to practice and you can cut down on his healing factor and de-escalate the threat. Discovering how much you can get away with is a sweet fortune. Attacks and mechanics that appear to be style over substance can give you an edge or completely neutralize parts of Vergil's kit. Your gap closers can help weave through his patterns, ranged attacks offer convenient damage, heavy hitting moves can be slotted in with the right timing. Every action at the player's disposal has a use in this fight, and Vergil will force you to study your options. Focusing purely on survival will lead to a poor performance. It's only once you play around with the toys at your disposal that you'll be ready for showtime. Now I'm sure we can all think of some bad bosses that could never hold a candle to Vergil, but let's look at a rival that tries and fails to recapture the glory of DMC3.
Helpful hint. Take a tip from the elders.
The fight between Dante and Nero is the closest thing DMC4 has to the Vergil bosses, but this playground squabble is not nearly as good of a duel. This all boils down to the fact that Dante was a playable character first and a boss second, and as a result he inherits a lot of abilities and traits that were never meant to be used against the player. Vergil had lulls in his animations, which made most of his attacks reactable and punishable, and they were usually signaled with a teleport to give you a warning in advance. Dante, on the other hand, can start attacking in an instant and finishes just as quickly. It's a nightmare to land a hit on him when he leaves only the tiniest of openings before he's ready to counter your counterattack. Vergil likes to present you problems with multiple solutions. How do you stop round trip? Well, you can block it, parry it, shoot it, or throw your own sword at it and impale our baby Blue along with it. The guns by comparison aren't awful, but they do feel rather restrictive. The pistols in particular have an annoying move ripped straight out of the tutorial where if you don't evade in the exact manner the game demands, Dante will just home in and pump you full of lead. On higher difficulties, Dante gets to use more of his weapons from later on in the campaign. Some of them actually suit the scenario. The Pandora laser and the uppercut have enough of a wind-up to give the player a fair chance. But what the hell am I meant to do about Lucifer? Once you've got a few pins driven into your chest, you might as well assume the position and accept the incoming damage. As much as Vergil is lauded for busting your balls, it's easy to imagine beating him without taking a single hit. Pulling it off is another matter entirely, but there are several consistent strategies to work around his tools. Dante is just a mess. The only tactic I can come up with is snatching him into an infinite loop of busters and sword flashes, which is basically one Konami code away from cheating. He's nowhere near as fun to fight as the one good boss in DMC4, let alone this ungodly Chad of a man, who was tailor-made to be your sparring partner. But this isn't about being hard for the sake of being hard. It's the final challenge to the player. Vergil tests you on everything you've learned, and he does so in a manner that doesn't explicitly force you to do so. There's no color-coordinated enemies or lock-and-key mechanics that require a specific weapon to be used. Instead, you're presented with a long drawn-out battle while offering several minor optimizations. These can provide you with a safety net or a chance for massive damage if you can pull them off. Hideaki Itsuno and the devs at Capcom managed to put lightning in a bottle when they made Vergil. This character knocked it out of the park in both visual design, writing, and pure gameplay without any conflicting elements. Everything that makes Vergil a great fight fits in right with his personality, how he contrasts to Dante as both his equal and his polar opposite, how he ties into the original game as Nilo Angelo, and how he would find huge success later on as a playable character. He's perfect in almost every way imaginable, making him a suitable send-off for the game, where you must take advantage of each tool in your possession for the odds to fall in your favor, proving yourself to be the most stylish devil in hell. Only then will your brother fall, because he will accept nothing less. You're a son of Sparda, and he expects you to act like one.